So today we're going over repulsor lifts. They're basically the fundamental technology of just about everything in Star Wars, and they're super cool, to say at least. Well, at least for me, but I am kinda a huge dork, but okay. The repulsor lift or repulsor lift engine, often referred to simply as the repulsor, was far the most well-known and used anti-gravity technology capable of levitating an object. It was created from subnuclear knots of space-time made by enormous power encompassing black holes. This technology is everywhere, and I mean it's everywhere. Standard repulsor lifts were exactly that, repulsor lifts with a platform on them. More or less all speeders are just repulsor lifts. Ships are just repulsor lifts. Well, sometimes they have other engines, doesn't matter. Freaking buildings are just repulsor lifts with stuff on them. Without repulsor lifts, there's no cool planets, there's just a bunch of boring non-flying stuff. Repulsor lifts were widely used and were included on a variety of vehicles. Repulsor lifts only work with a gravity well, as the technology required mass to push against. They used minimal power and were reliable enough to be utilized continuously. Repulsor lifts could be assembled in arrays, clusters, or vanes tandem with microcoils of gravitic knots, so to speak. These units were mounted on a vehicle or a spacecraft, usually on the underside. The many repulsor lifts needed for a large ship were typically powered by a dedicated anti-grav generator, but that's just for big ships like Star Destroyers. This technology is really common. Let's see some of its uses. First off, it's useful when you want to make something cool looking but doesn't work. Fuck architecture. Just put a bunch of repulsor lifts around and here you go. They require very little energy. They're quiet, actually noiseless, is that even a word? On a planet where everything is just stacked on top of each other and just collapsing, you could just use repulsor lifts to literally hold everything in place. Under the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, for example, there were just a bunch of old stuff and they could collapse, so the Jedi Order often checked the lower parts of Coruscant under the building to ensure safety. They also put a bunch of repulsor lifts everywhere so the building wouldn't fall apart while everything else would. Repulsor lifts were used in everything almost. If you just want something to levitate, use a repulsor lift, like it was used on a bunch of medical droids and even tables. You want to have a speeder? Okay, just take something, whatever, and put a repulsor lift under it. Here you go. Vehicles that commonly employed repulsor lifts included speeder bikes, land speeders, air speeders, and starships capable of operating in gravity wells. Power chairs and skimboards also used this technology. In fact, the landing legs of some core ships could not support the ship's immense weight without the aid of repulsor lifts. Repulsor units built for vehicles could also be used in droids. MD-0C6 used the repulsor engines on a speeder boat on himself to increase his own mobility. Now people seem to have a big problem with ships in Star Wars, and okay, I'm not saying their design is very believable, but it doesn't even work like you think. People often have the biggest problems with non-aerodynamic ships in Imperial era. The famous X-Wing and M-Wing both worked with repulsor lifts. People are like, how does this even take off? The wings are too small. Guess what? Even if the ship would be a cube shaped or a sphere shaped, it could still fly, just like these drones, because they used repulsor lifts. These things basically take off with the repulsor lifts and can go up and down with them. Then they just used real engines to move in different directions. The only reason they turn and spin in a fight is to dodge the attack or to change direction with the help of the resistance made by the wings. Besides that, these ships don't really need to have cool shapes. That's why M-Wings look so, how would you describe it, non-aerodynamic, I guess? Because they don't need to be aerodynamic. All the shape of the ship needs to do is change the direction. Now in space, repulsor lifts don't really work. There they need to use the real engines. So yeah, most ships have repulsor lifts plus primary or even secondary engines. I wanted to make a video on how can ships fly in Star Wars, but nah, here we go, repulsor lifts. Because repulsor lifts are so popular, even in military of course, there are of course technologies that can make them misfunction or just destroy them. Repulsor lifts vehicles are unable to drive throughout shields, requiring walkers or stuff on wheels to proceed throughout shields to disable them before repulsor lifts vehicles can proceed. That's the only reason vehicles like that even exist. It's ridiculously easy to shield yourself just by having shields on, and ships operating on repulsor lifts are gonna crash if they try anything. That's the reason why droids had to have legs and why basically everything in Star Wars doesn't just fly around, cause it's ridiculously easy to disable them. This was notably seen in Battle of Naboo. Trade Federation had to send its droids throughout Gungan shields to destroy the generators carried by the Fambas, which are basically these big things, before the AAT and MTTs can proceed. Capital ships, which are completely dependent on repulsor lifts when flying in atmosphere, cannot enter atmosphere if planetary shields are active. The 5 planets of the Corellian system possessed massive repulsors on their surface. They were so powerful that they could destroy capital ships in nearby space and even stop the devastating firepower of Centerpoint Station, which created gravitational shifts great enough to destroy stars. There were many manufacturers of the repulsor lifts: Artec Repulsor Lift Company, Baku Repulsor Corp, Sorosub Corporation, and many others. Repulsor lifts were basically like engines for, well, anything, so these corporations were really huge. But yeah, this is what we know about repulsor lifts. If you like this video, then like it and subscribe maybe, I don't know, just saying.